All right, welcome back. I've been doing this show for over 10 years now, and I always talk about the fact that I feel like I come here and almost talk about the same issues every week, simply because we know how Nigeria is. It's very hard for things to sort of evolve and grow. Our issues have remained the same. Power is still a problem. Security is still a problem. You know, all of these things are still there. But the one thing I'm very proud of that has evolved in my time on this show has been the entertainment and creative industry. We've gone through years where Nigeria was doing well enough in entertainment, but we're sort of champions of our space to a point now where we're competing globally on all levels. We're talking Grammys, we're talking Oscars, we're talking the Met Gala, you know. And it's very exciting to see. We're going to be having a conversation on local content and global appeal for Nigeria. Joining me from Abuja is a co-founder Inside Nollywood and lead for Big Cabal Media, Anita Boigbe. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me, Ebuka.
Are you as excited as I am, you know, for what's happening with entertainment? Because, you know, sometimes you get very excited, but you also wonder, are we getting too excited? Is this sort of just a flash in the pan? When you look at what's happening with the space, especially with music, you know, like I just mentioned earlier, we saw the Met Gala, which is sort of the biggest stage for fashion and sort of iconic members of the entertainment industry globally. And we had two Nigerians there, homegrown, you know, they're working with all the global stars. You know, do you see the Nigerian entertainment industry now here to stay? Or are you still sort of feeling that, okay, maybe this might be for a few years, let's see how this goes?
I mean, it's very interesting. I remember that I think about 10 years ago, we sort of knew that the industry was going to grow, but I don't think that we thought we were going to get here this fast. Anybody who is doubting the industry right now, I think that they're just being haters, to be very honest. In terms of the type of talent that we're seeing dominate the industry at this time, and then also when you're thinking of the kind of content that we're putting out, there's still ways to go, but essentially, when you look at the way that talent has, you know, carried the industry by itself, regardless of the kind of support or lack of thereof that they get, it's just an interesting thing to see that we're on par with what is happening globally. And I mean, it doesn't hurt now that social media is here to help.
Yeah. So I think one fear that I hear a lot of people express, sometimes legitimately, sometimes not, is, you know, what all of this exposure now does to influence what is original to us. I mean, I saw some people sort of complaining about Burna Boy and Thames not wearing African attires, for example, to the Met Gala. I don't think that's that serious. But generally, you know, with regards to sort of the content we put out, you know, the lyrics, how those guys internationally start to try to, you know, meddle and, you know, sort of water down what has made us who we are. Do you think that's a legitimate worry?
I think what people do not understand is that you start off a certain way and you don't necessarily sell out, although some people do, but you essentially try to make sure that your material, your product starts to appeal to a wide range of audiences. And so what usually happens, for instance, it's just like what happens when our musicians collaborate with Latin American artists. So you find that people are saying, oh, I don't like the lyrics, I don't like the way the flow was. But in essence, it's just a thing of trying to cross over to another market. And so what happens in that sense is that you're trying to tailor your, you know, your message, your craft, so that it has like the flavor of the audiences that you're trying to reach. Legitimately, we can say, oh, these are legitimate concerns in terms of we don't want people to completely lose the flavor of what we've come to know them for. But apart from that, I think that there's just a lot of grace that we need to extend to people who are trying to break out, you know, of the continent, who are trying to have global success stories, you know, because this means that sometimes they're going to sing what you don't want to hear. Sometimes they're going to have films that you don't want to watch. But then those things travel well in terms of, you know, what the other audiences in other markets want to see. I think what we want to push for, essentially, is balance. We want people to be able to, you know, balance the flavors that have made them, you know, household names in their countries, in Nigeria, for instance. And then at the same time, they have elements that make them sellable in these places without losing the essence of themselves.
Yeah, let's talk Nollywood now, which I know is your actual forte, because it sort of took longer for Nollywood. They started this run even before the music industry did. It looked like it took them a while, but it looks like now things are starting to look very exciting. Yes, the content sort of distribution space has been democratized because of all the streaming platforms that have appeared everywhere now. And we're seeing Nollywood getting some attention now away from the traditional spaces of the African continent and maybe a few Caribbean countries. You know, so that also impacts on quality. And it's very exciting to see what this brings. But there's also the talk about, you know, are we ready, you know, for this sort of global attention that Nollywood should be getting now? Do you think we are there?
So I think it's a case of the spotlight coming before we had time to mature. So we have democratized the space. I mean, with streaming, with people being able to have their films travel. But essentially, because that came on too soon, a little too soon, before we could develop our structures, we could learn better business models. What you can see is that our films are traveling quite all right, but you still have like fear. Personally, for me, like every time there's a new project coming out, I know that they are going to, depending on the platform they eventually choose, they are going to, you know, extend beyond the shores of Nigeria. But the fear still stands there within to say, what does this content look like? Are we getting the chance to travel with our content without actually just fine-tuning what it is we're selling? Nollywood has come far, but I just wish that perhaps we could do a sort of multiverse thing where we were building our industry and building the structures better to a point where we don't have to be afraid as much every time we have to export something. But all in all, we have people who are trying to, like, you know, get ahead of the curve. We have people who are trying to learn and just travel and learn how to do things better. But it's a work in progress. I do think the music industry sort of, it has been easier for them to do this, you know, to improve their quality level at the same time that distribution and all that others are improving. But for film, it's a touch and go thing. We are happy for the growth, but at the same time, it's just, I don't know, Ebuka, you too, if you have those fears, you're just afraid sometimes about the kind of quality that you're going to see on these platforms.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And I mean, I think the difference between music and movies, movies are way more technical. It involves a number of people. It takes months to put something out. You know, you find sometimes an artist tells you, oh, I made this hit song in 10 minutes in the studio. You can't really do that with the film that you want to, you know, have quality. So which brings me to the question of, you know, what should we be doing now? Because the streaming guys are here, they're not leaving, and they've seen that at least some of these movies are working or some of these series are working. I always hear the talk of Nigeria, stories are not the problem, is the output or the technicality of it, you know. How do we start to bridge that deficit? Because the world has started paying attention, and we saw what happened with Gangs of Lagos, for example. That has sort of shifted the narrative even for me, because we all knew they were paying attention, but this felt a little different, and it feels like anybody trying to do anything now has to be just a little more serious. What sort of things should, you know, filmmakers or people in the industry be thinking now?
Yeah, I think it has to do with attention to detail and just process. And again, just a lot of business education has to happen within this space. So you have we've gone from a place where maybe one person, one distributor had monopoly to now this stage where you have like you have options now. And really what you want to do is that you want to think and strategize about the best ways to, you know, utilize these options. And that's where the process and just general education come in. Stories, Nigerians have abundance of stories in terms of, I mean, if you walk down the street now and ask people random things, you would get stories. But it's in the development of those stories. We don't spend a lot of time developing our stories. And so for the things that you mentioned, for instance, Gangs of Lagos, it took a long time for that movie to be made. And you find that the things that eventually travel well, you see that a lot of time was spent to develop it from story stage down to production. We don't spend a lot of time with story. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about all the elements and how we want to excite or delight the audience, you know, across, you know, all the acts of the film. So there's just that on one hand. On the other hand, you just have a lot of people scraping by and trying to make do with what they have. So it's a little tricky to blame, because you know that there's a lot of struggle involved in making the industry work where it currently is. And just brings me to my first point of saying we needed more time to build structures, but we can still build them now. If we fix our processes, especially seeing how stories go from ideas to production, and then we have, a clear sense of how we want to build the business part of the industry, what happens is that people start developing these things as actual products, not just in terms of, oh, I carried the camera to Yaba and I started shooting something. Just building it as an actual product, because you want it to travel. You're thinking of what the IP means, in terms of returns and in terms of ripple effect across the industry. So there's work to do, but it just all boils down to attention to detail and what the end goal is at the end of the day.
Yeah, a very, very valid point you made there about, how hard generally it is just to get anything done in Nigeria. It's very true, which is why sometimes I, for one, struggle between, being a critic of work and also understanding that it's important to also give them their flowers, because it is tough here. But speaking of giving them their flowers, let's talk about the AMVCAs now. It's upon us again. It's our biggest, movie awards. A lot of very competitive categories. New categories were also added on this year, so it's a much bigger event this year. When you saw the nominations, were you excited with what you saw? I mean, a lot of people have talked about a few misses maybe here and there, but generally, was that a reflection of what the industry has looked like before this year?
The AMVCAs this year has been interesting. I think we had to do like a long spotlight on it at Inside Nollywood. I wasn't surprised. I think what it was, I couldn't see how much it had grown as an award, really. So when AMVCAs first came out, there was so much like buzz about it, because it meant that there was something that we could look forward to. There were too many people in the categories. There are too many people in the categories. Like, there's so much that's going on that just, you kind of know where some things are going to tilt at the end of the day. But overall, I think that what it signals for us is that beyond just, African Magic and, MultiChoice having this as a platform to showcase their films, and we do need an award ceremony that highlights the industry at the end of the year, but we need more. Like, so the MVCs today, it works. The name covers it. So whenever you want to even get angry, you remember that the name is Viewers' Choice Awards. So it works. The popularity play around it works. Everything else works because there's a name brand that covers it. But in terms of what an award should mean for the industry, to spur an industry to be better, I think we need one more or two more that hold the same level of prestige. But as this is, I don't think there were any surprises for me, except there was a project that got, I think, a lot of nominations, and the lead in that project did not get a nomination. And everybody just went on like it didn't mean anything. And that was, it was a little silly to see, because, so I think that was the biggest shocker for me. And what else? I enjoy that now there's just more recognition for non-acting categories. So that's something to be happy about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But I mean, you mentioned so many people, and it was also a struggle I had even with the Academy Awards. When you watch the Academy Awards now, you see some categories with 10 nominees or 7 nominees. I'm not sure what's happening. Is it that too many good films have been done? But I guess that's also reflecting on the AMVCAs. And yes, whether we like it or not, Nollywood also now has better projects, might not be much better than they used to be, but at least they're better than they were. And maybe that is also reflecting. And remember, this is not just a Nigerian award, but I definitely agree with you on the fact that we might need more of this sort of platforms. But it requires money. And I always wonder, Nollywood needs money. Who's now going to invest in the awards if the movies are not even getting the money that they need?
That's a tough question every time. Because, I mean, you hear it, or you see, you're looking at the movie and you can tell exactly where the money finished. And so government is there. I personally do not think that the government is doing enough in terms of spotlighting. But I also think that the industry itself has not been able to, players in the industry have not been able to sell themselves in terms of, how this is a product that has to yield return on investment. A few people have been able to do this properly. And so you can see the King of Boys, you can see the Gangs of Lagos, and you just look through like the executive producer list and you see that work is being done. But essentially, you find that in the selling of these films and in the way that these films are presented, you can clearly see value as a person who wants to invest in a film, but you can't say the case for 90% of the other things that come out. So when people are putting money in things, like they want to know why they're putting money in things. And that's why government is always the first go-to. You want the government to actually set up structures where people can lend and then just lower the barrier of entry for people who actually want to make good stuff. But also we need more private investors to set up funds, funds basically for set aside for things like this. It's difficult because it's very hard to quantify the ROI of any entertainment project, but we really need more people, the way we've done for tech, the way we've done for the music industry. We need more people to take chances on the industry, and set up funds for these things. Everyone should see it as a long-term investment in terms of when you look at the way industries perform across the world. You look at Disney, for instance. So it gives, some sort of overview of what you should expect at the end of the day somehow. So in terms of who should invest, government definitely needs to be doing more. And then we need private companies, we need people with money to actually set up structures for funding the industry.
All right, before we go now very quickly, not to drag you into politics, but we have a new government coming in. You've talked a lot about government there. When you look at where Nollywood is at, where it's going, all of the streaming platforms are here, but we're still talking about the money conversations and the studios not being available. Davido had a great concert at TBS the other day, but there's also conversations about the fact that we don't have enough concert spaces across the country and all of that. Are these things government should be thinking about? What do you think the new government can do? Are you hopeful even?
It's a tricky question. If I'm hopeful, I don't know if I'm hopeful for it. I don't know that in terms of what government should do, we really want to set up a system where creatives. So I don't know, like you're watching a film and you see that it's sponsored by, say, a state government in the US, and we really want the government to take two things. Number one, we need the government to set up a system where filmmakers can go submit their decks and describe the IP, describe how the IP is affecting or just going to yield returns at the end of the day. And then there's a system that does not require them to give an arm and a leg to get the money and, just go. I know something currently exists, but it's just so exhausting to go through. And I feel like we need to simplify that process. The second thing is that we actually need government to provide infrastructure support. Like people need to be able to own studios. They need land for that. People need to also be able to travel across the country to film. One of the reasons why the audience is always shouting that our stories are very Lagos-centered is that it is difficult to film in places that you cannot travel to.
Okay, Anita, sorry.
And even in Lagos that we have to film a lot of our stuff, you find that they're just a lot that we need to think of. So for me, those are the areas that we need to focus on.
Thank you very much, Anita. So very sorry to cut you short, but we run out of time, and I think your points are very, very valid. Hopefully, May 29th breathes some more fresh air into the entire entertainment industry. Thanks a lot for joining us today.